Hello, my name is Kirby Lee Sinisak, and I am doing a oral book presentation on how to talk so kids can learn at home and in school by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. All right. The target audience of this book would be parents and teachers, and obviously people who either study children or are in childcare centers or workers, occupational therapists. I believe that this book could be used for generally anyone that interacts with children. It's unique because it's written in a dialogue that is easy for people to read. I myself am not a huge book fan, reader, bookworm type situation. So I really enjoyed the dialogue of this book and how it broke it down into cartoons and stories, and also using real and relatable situations that I personally found were very, very helpful in breaking it down in understanding wise. The ideas are logically presented and easy to follow. They're very logical and very relatable. As I just said, I liked the use of comics in this book and stories to break up the reading. As myself, I'm not a big reader, and I know that some people, like myself, when they like a book, they tend to read it from start to finish. So the comics and the stories in the book were really nice to kind of like break up the information, but also make me not want to put it down that much more. I found the questions from the parents at the ends of some of the chapters to be a little bit lengthy, and they kind of started to run off into where I got lost or just lost interest, I guess you could say. But I did gain a lot of information from the insight of the questions. The author's style is informal as it uses personal pronouns and conversations used in a setting with teachers. It goes back and forth between personal life connections and the setting of lunchroom with teachers, the setting of classroom with teachers, and such. Its intended audience is parents and teachers and childcare workers. As I said, I believe this book could be used for anyone who interacts with children in general, as it has a lot of insight as to why certain children act certain ways, or maybe why that child that you see every morning walking to school with their mom doesn't seem too impressed. So even if you're not working with children, this book can be a really good insight as to maybe some of the questions that you've been wondering when you see children interacting. The ideas in this book relate to a lot of the same ideas that we're studying, as this book uses many ideas like helpful praise, constructive responses, alternative punishment methods, constructive criticism, I first message, and this book is really all about putting in perspective how you yourself learned the behaviors that you've learned. I know that coming from the home that I was brought up in, I personally was concerned about some of the behaviors that I have learned as an adult and how they would translate into speaking to children. And this book gave me a really good kind of eye-opening as to maybe how I could change it and how it's okay that those behaviors are learned, and I'm not the only one. The two chapters I chose for the chapter review for this book are chapters 2 and 6. The first review I will be doing is on chapter 2. I chose this chapter because I believe it gives real insight as to why we might see mistaken behaviors, and it puts into perspective almost an earth-shattering realization that some kids are not as safe and loved as we believe them to be. I know myself, being a mom, I tend to group children into a group that all children are treated how I would treat my daughter, when that's not the reality. Is that most children are not as loved and safe as we want them to be, and that translates into certain mistaken behaviors that we might be wondering why this child is doing that. This chapter gives real life examples on how the child who's coming in tired and maybe falling asleep on their desk while you're doing your English lecture, maybe working a night job to help their parents pay rent, or a child that comes off as rude and abruptful and closed off, maybe experiencing some forms of mental abuse at home. And we don't see that until we really kind of dig deeper in children. I myself was that child who was falling asleep on my desk in my socials lecture, or missing my afternoon class, or coming in late because I was working 2 jobs and I was taking care of my little brother for my parents. So I would leave in the afternoon and miss my afternoon class, or skip my afternoon class to go pick my little brother up from school if he need be, or I was coming in late because I was working all night and got 2 hours of sleep before I had to get everyone up and ready for school. And it wasn't until I had my dance teacher in grade 10 pull me aside and ask me why I was so tired all the time and cranky and just not there, not right. And I explained to her what was going on in my life, and that was the first time in my years of high school that someone had actually taken the time in the minute to say, hey, I noticed that you're tired and you're acting this way, and I'm kind of wondering why, and maybe there is a reason why, and I'd like to know that. It was nice that someone had thought that those mistaken behaviors weren't just mistaken behaviors, that no one had brushed me off and said, oh, she's just sleeping because she's a teenager and she's tired, and maybe someone had thought that there was something more going on in my life. The author explained this really, really well, the outcome of positive speech to children and the way that we ask or tell them to do things. I know that I myself personally catch myself being a bit of a drill sergeant, I guess you could say, and saying, like, oh, do this and brush your teeth and go faster and zip up your jacket and we're gonna be late, and all the quotes that classic moms would say, I guess. And reading this chapter really gave me a realization, and the author put it into such great words, that those little pushes can be very hurtful to a child sometimes, and that we don't know, especially if they're not our child, what they're going through. So telling them to hurry up and to go faster and to stop being so slow or so sleepy may be very detrimental to their mental health, and it could be the reason why they're not going faster or they are so slow, is because everyone keeps telling them that or drilling them to do that, and they have all these things going on at home and no one's taking the time to really consider why they're doing these things and how they could fix them. Instead of drilling into children what they need to do, I learned to engage in better questioning instead of criticizing, and maybe asking children why they're so tired this morning, and instead of just saying, oh, you're so slow. And I could apply this to working with smaller children by using a silly voice when I'm asking them to do things, and changing the situation to a fun, light method of learning. I apologize, I'm so awkward talking on camera. The summary of my next chapter is chapter 6. I chose this chapter as it speaks to me on a personal level. Growing up, I was always labeled as a bad kid. I came from a broken home. I was poor. I didn't have nice clothes. From the minute that I got into a higher grade, I would say about grade 5, I was always labeled as that kid that was dirty or bad or rude or abruptful. And I had teachers tell me by the time I got to high school that I would never amount to anything because of my family history, and that I was born to be a bad kid. I was always labeled as a bad kid. I accepted the accusations and became hopeless. Like this chapter explains that the more you tell a child that they're bad or that they are harmful or slow or even stupid, that it really tends to sink in, especially because children, when they go to school, they're seeking and learning, and they're wanting to be the better versions of themselves. So if we're telling them every day that they're bad or that they're slow, then it's really going to sink in. This